Hello, my friends. Thanks for taking a moment to watch this interview with best-selling author Bob Burg. Now, I want to start with a question. Do you think you can really systematically get the results that you want from others while also making them feel generally good about themselves, about the process, and about interacting with you? Well, according to Bob, the answer is absolutely you can do that. Now, Bob is a highly sought-after speaker. He speaks at corporate conventions, entrepreneurial events. He's spoken to audiences both small and large, ranging from 50 to over 15,000 people. Now, over the last several years, he used to be very well known for the best-selling book Endless Referrals. But in recent history, it's been this wonderful parable, The Go-Giver, that has really caught people's attention, and it's really spread like wildfire. That book has shot to #6 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, and it did that in just 3 weeks after its release. It also reached #9 on Business Week's bestseller list. And that book has been translated into 21 languages, and it's actually his fourth book to sell over 250,000 copies. Now, his newest book is entitled Adversaries Into Allies: Win People Over Without Manipulation or Coercion. And it discusses what Bob calls the art of ultimate influence. Now, Bob is also an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system, and he believes that the amount of money that any of us are going to make is directly proportional to the number of people that we serve. He's also an unapologetic animal fanatic and serves as a member of the board of directors of Furry Friends Adoption and Clinic in Juniper, Florida, where Bob calls home. So please help me welcome Bob Burg. Thanks for being here, Bob.
Thank you, Matt. It's a terrific studio audience you have.
Yes, yep, they're well trained. They applaud almost on demand, it seems. It's amazing. So, Bob, the title of your new book is Adversaries Into Allies, and of course, this immediately creates this question in the mind of, are you saying that anybody that doesn't agree with us or that stands in our way is really an adversary or an enemy?
The answer is no. However, it does sound like that, doesn't it? So it's a good question. No, in the context of this book, an adversary could be someone who's a very nice person who, under normal circumstances, you might really like, but in this particular context, they are somehow perhaps standing in the way of your personal or professional satisfaction. Example, it could be the customer service person who, not very nice person, but you're needing to bring something back to return it, and if you're like I am, you lost the receipt or threw it away, and as you approach the customer service desk, you see this big sign behind the wall, absolutely no returns without receipt. And again, the customer service person themselves may be a great person, but they're not equipped to know how to handle the situation in such a way that they're able to please you, the customer, and also do as they're expected. It might be the boss. You're asking for a raise. And again, you might love your boss, but he or she isn't necessarily in a position to want to give you a raise at this time. So is it adversarial? Well, it doesn't have to be, and that's the whole point. We want to bring it from adversarial to one of allies. I always loved what the prolific Japanese home run hitter Sadaharu Oh used to say. They used to call him the Japanese Babe Ruth because he was so profound when it came to hitting home runs in the Japanese Professional Baseball League. And what he said was that he never looked at the opposing pitcher as his adversary, but rather as his partner in hitting home runs. And I always thought that was a terrific reframe, a terrific way of looking at it. Now, Matt, that doesn't mean the opposing pitcher saw it that way. I'm sure they didn't see themselves as his partner in hitting home runs. They were looking to get him out. But it's how he saw it. And in the same way, that's how we see our adversaries, if you will, as simply our partners in helping us attain satisfaction, while at the same time, we help them to do the same. We help them to genuinely feel good about themselves, about the situation, and about us.
Well, just as you're describing this, I'm thinking this must have just astronomical effects on our ability to achieve better outcomes in our lives, both personally and professionally. Because I think so many of us go around, and we see anyone that seems to be, in between us and our goal as maybe an adversary. And this idea of turning it into a win-win, where we see them as a partner that's helping us, and we're creating a situation that's good for them, it sounds amazing. You had mentioned that the pitchers probably didn't see Sakahara O, I think you said.
Sakahara O, yes.
Yeah, they didn't see him as a partner, but I would guess that what you're suggesting is that we can actually help people to see us as their partner. Would you say that's true as we go through this process?
Exactly, because what it is, it's all how we decide to frame it. See, they may see us as an adversary, and it might even be unconsciously so, not consciously as an adversary, but if we choose to see them rather as a partner, then what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to elicit their commitment rather than compliance. See, there's a big difference between trying to make someone do something. It's the difference between force and power. Force is control. It's manipulation, intimidation, compliance. Hey, we see it all the time when it comes to corporate, right? The employee knows if they want any chance for advancement, a promotion, a raise, or to not be punished or disciplined or fired, they need to do what they're told. But again, that's compliance. And the biggest challenge, Matt, in trying to lead, and you're a great leader, you're a great influencer, and so you see this, the biggest challenge in trying to lead through compliance, whether it's a team of 1,000 or 100 or a committee of 5 or a family member or a friend or that difficult customer service person, is that with compliance, they'll tend to, at best, do exactly what they're told and not one bit more, and that's at best. At worst, they'll find a way to sabotage the process completely, consciously or unconsciously. On the other hand, when you have commitment, that's an entirely different story. And this commitment is practically always a result of the influencer really understanding at a heart level, a core level, what I believe was Dale Carnegie's foundational premise in his classic, The Wonderful How to Win Friends and Influence People, where he wrote, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So the great influencer, the ultimate influencer, constantly ask themselves questions such as, how does what I'm asking this person to do align with their goals, their wants, their needs, their desires? How does what I'm asking this other human being to do align with their values? And when asking ourselves these questions intelligently, thoughtfully, genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another person into doing our will, but as a way to build everyone in the process, we've come a lot closer to earning that commitment. One of my great friends and mentors, Don Discumachi, a wonderful speaker and author on leadership, influence, team building, I love this. She says, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to influence, compliance will never take you where commitment can go. And I think that's so profound.
I think so too. Now, in your book, you tell a wonderful story about your father, and to illustrate how much character has to do with our ability to influence others. Would you mind sharing that story here?
Oh, no, I'd love to. It's what I call my favorite dad story. And when we talk about influence, and when you think of it, what you have to give, you offer least of all through what you say, although what you say is very important. More importantly is what you do, but even more importantly is who you are, because who you are determines what you do and what you say. And that has to do with character. And character comes from an old Greek word for scrape or scratch. It came to mean an engraved marking and eventually a defining quality. We could say that the total of all one's qualities is their defining quality or character. And what's interesting, and what I think we really see in my dad's story, is that people of character, while they certainly make mistakes, and they certainly correct their mistakes, and they course correct, and while they can be flexible on methodology, They are immovable, immutable, and unchangeable when it comes to value-based decisions and actions. And what happened was I was probably about 11 or 12 years old, maybe even a little younger, and my mom and dad were having new carpet installed. And at lunch, and the crew chief was one of these guys, nice guy, but a very just kind of grizzled, just kind of rough around the edges kind of guy. And now my folks bought pizza for the crew for lunch, so my dad took the pizza out to the crew chief and his crew, and was checking on how the job was going. Now my dad's one of these guys, grew up very, very poor, inner city, a real kind of Americana type of story, and so everybody felt they could relate to my dad. He also has had a gift to this day, a gift with people, which is just amazing. But the crew chief wanted to kind of bond, I guess, with my dad, so he said something like, "Oh, Mr. Burg, I'll tell you, this is an expensive job. Those women will really spend your money for, our money for us, won't they?" or something like that. And I guess what he was looking for was my dad to kind of agree and jokingly down talk, and there's no way my dad would ever do that. But he was also very kind and tactful. And so, Dad said something, "Well, I'll tell you what, when they're the reason you are where you are, you can't do enough for them. It's your pleasure to do that. And now this was not what the crew chief expected, so he kind of tried again. "Well, that's true, but they really will play off on that, won't they?" And Dad answered just as I knew he was going to, something like, "Well, I'll tell you what, she was there before I had anything. If it wasn't for her, there wouldn't be any of this, that." And so he was very nice about it, but he was making his point. He was teaching by doing, you know what I'm saying? And then the boss tried one more time and finally gave up. And so, and I'm listening in the background. They didn't even know I was there. And I don't know if that taught the crew chief a lesson about how a real man talks about his wife, always edifyingly, as opposed to the opposite, but it sure showed a young 10 or 11 or 12-year-old, whatever it was, what character is all about. And that's just one of those lessons that I just am so grateful to my dad for.
That's a great lesson, just through because that's a really easy way, or a really easy situation to just kind of follow the crowd, so to speak.
Right.
I want to fit in, and I want to laugh too. I want to make somebody laugh, and that's amazing that he's just so values driven that he wasn't movable.
Thank you.
Now, you've already talked a lot about influence and this idea of if we just have compliance, at best we get exactly what we asked for. At worst, the whole task might be derailed. Mm-hmm. And so I'm guessing that's probably why I know you often talk about how if you're a boss or a supervisor of some type, people ask all the time, well, why can't you just tell them what to do? And if it's not done, can't you just fire them and get someone else? What would you say to somebody who asks a question like that?
Well, it's a great question, Matt. And what I would say is, yes, you can. You can do that if you'd like, and we certainly see many bosses do that. But then you got to kind of, go with the Dr. Phil. Well, how's that working for you? And I would say that to someone, but it's, and I'm sure Dr. Phil didn't invent that particular phrase, but he sure does it really well when he says, well, how's that working for you? And so, nobody's going to change, Matt, until they first see that there's a challenge with the way they're doing it. And if someone is a boss or in a position of authority, right, positional leadership, John Maxwell has always called it, they're probably not going to get the results they want, other than in very, very definable circumstances or situations. But that's really, it's no way to live, it's no way to lead, it's no way to be. So if you really want to get the best short-term and long-term results, you're going to want to elicit people's commitment. And to do that, you're going to have to match what you want with what they want.
Mm. And so this probably leads into, you talk a lot about persuasion, and I think that could easily be perceived as you're trying to manipulate somebody. But you say that there's a big difference between persuasion and manipulation. How do you delineate those two things from each other?
Yeah, and it's an important distinction, because when you think of influence itself, influence can be defined simply as the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. Now, someone could do that through manipulation. Someone could do that through persuasion. I see them as being, opposites. I see them as, but at the same time, let's understand that both the manipulator and the persuader both understand human nature, and both understand how to work within human nature in order to elicit that action. Now, I would see them as cousins, manipulators and persuaders, but I see one as the evil cousin and one as the good cousin.
Yeah.
Now, I have often been asked, for all the time I've been teaching this, how do you define the difference? And I never thought I did a particularly good job at defining it. And then one day I read this book. It was written in 1986. It was written by a man by the name of Dr. Paul W. Sweats. The book is The Art of Talking So That People Will Listen. But as you can imagine, it was much more about listening than it was about talking. And it was a wonderful, wonderful book. And in this book, Dr. Sweats stated that manipulation aims at control, not cooperation. It does not consider the good of the other party. It results in a win-lose situation. Now, Dr. Sweat goes on to say that in direct opposition to the manipulator, the persuader seeks to enhance the self-esteem of the other party. The result is that people respond better because they're treated as responsible, or we might say response-able, self-directing individuals. So based on what Dr. Sweat so expertly and eloquently said, I would say that it begins with intent. Now, it doesn't end there, but it begins there, because both the manipulator and the persuader, understanding human nature, what moves, what drives people, can both elicit immediate results. But that's where it ends, Matt, because once you know you've been manipulated, you will resist that person, you will avoid that person. Even if you have to work with them or what have you, you're going to try to, mitigate anything they could do to affect you. Not the case with the persuader, who had your interest in mind and made sure you felt good about it and won as well. So when a persuader attempts to persuade, you're much more likely to commit to that because you already feel good about them. You know, like, and trust them. So, a manipulator can have employees, but very rarely a loyal team. A manipulator can make the sale, but very rarely have a happy customer, an ongoing customer, and not a referral-based customer, a referral source. Hey, a manipulator can even have a family they love and a family who loves them, but rarely is it a functional family. So manipulation is not only not good business practice, it's not good life practice as well.
Yeah, it's just seems like you're going to be burning bridges immediately as soon as someone, and it may be, as you pointed out, it may be a while before somebody realizes, oh my gosh, this person was really manipulating me. But once they do, that relationship is over. I know you probably see this a lot, as I have in the sales world, where people they come out of the chute, their first 2 or 3 years in sales, they're just rock stars, and then all of a sudden you start to notice, like, wait a second, they're just they're not really growing anymore. In fact, their sales start to decline, and it seems like those are all the people that are trying to do the manipulation, and they're the talkers, and they don't do enough listening and really understanding the needs of somebody else.
Yeah, we call them the salespeople who are always looking for a new territory.
Yeah, because they can't grow within the territory they already have. Right?
You already know me, right?
Right.
So.
Now, in your book, you talk about this idea of ultimate influence. How is that different than regular? Just how we would normally think of the term influence.
Yes, that's a great question, because when influence is simply the ability to move a person to that desired action, ultimate influence always does so in a way that, yes, you attain satisfaction, yes, you get the results you want, but it's always with the benefit of the other person in mind. It's always in such a way that this other person feels genuinely and authentically, and this is the key, good about themselves, good about the situation, good about you. See, when we go back to that manipulator who may not be trying to hurt the other person, they just don't care if they do, as long as they get what they want. The persuader and the ultimate influencer, that will never happen. They are, because their value system says that in order for me to feel good about it, the other person's got to feel good about it.
Fantastic. So now you talk about these 5 elements of having ultimate influence or being the ultimate influencer. Could you give us just maybe a quick overview? And I think we've probably got about 5 minutes or so left, and just curious if you could maybe just talk about what each of those elements are, these 5 pillars of being the ultimate influencer, and maybe just a brief overview of each, kind of give an idea of how the book moves somebody through this process.
Sure. The first one is to control your own emotions. Principle number 1. That's where it begins, because it's only when you can control your own emotions, when you're in control of yourself, when you're the boss of yourself, that it's only then that you're even in a position to take what could be a negative situation or person and turn it into a win for everyone involved. The reason this can be difficult is because we're human beings and we're emotional creatures. We like to think of ourselves as logical, and to a certain extent, of course, we are, but we're pretty emotion driven. And there are times, Matt, that people can push our buttons, not on purpose necessarily, though sometimes on purpose, but they can say or do things that cause us to feel badly about ourselves, or cause us to feel angry or upset or what have you. And when that happens, now we can't possibly be part of the solution. We're stuck in being part of the problem. So it's not that I'm saying not to have emotions. Emotions are a great part of life. They're part of what make us human and what makes life worthwhile and joyful. But again, going back to one of my great friends and mentors, Dondi Scumaci, who I quoted earlier, I love what she says about this as well. She says, by all means, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you are driving the car.
Yes.
Principle number 2 is understand the clash of belief systems. What is a belief? A belief is simply a subjective truth. It's the truth as we understand the truth to be, which means it may be our truth, but not necessarily the truth. Sometimes our truth and the truth are the same, sometimes not. But our subjective truth, what we believe is true, or the way the world is always based on our belief system, which is a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television, movies, popular culture, cultural mores, every experience that comes into our life. What's interesting, though, is our belief system is pretty much set by the time we're little more than toddlers. After that, every new experience that comes into our life is pretty much based upon that foundational premise. This is unconscious. We did not ask for these beliefs. They were handed to us and we unconsciously accepted them. But we grow up and we live our lives and we think and feel and say and do things based on that paradigm, based on our unconscious belief system, that unconscious operating system. Well, so does this other person with whom we're about to have a potentially difficult interaction with. So what we need to do is we need to not necessarily understand their belief system. They probably don't even understand their belief system. What we need to do, though, is simply understand that they are probably coming at the world from a different viewpoint than we are. And once we acknowledge this, once we understand this, now we're in a position we can create the context for a mutual win. The third principle is acknowledge their ego. Now, when I say acknowledge their ego, I don't mean by saying, hey, buddy, your ego, get a hold of, no, not at all. That would have the opposite effects. I just mean by understanding that people are ego-driven. And in a sense, 95% of being able to move a person to a certain action is how you help them feel about themselves and how you help them feel about you. So while we'd like to think we should be logical, this goes back to emotion, and the ego and the emotion are very connected. So we need to just simply acknowledge that if this person's saying or doing things that are somewhat counterproductive, there's a good chance their ego is at play, and we're going to have to honor that and acknowledge that in order to obtain the results we want. Principle number 4 is to set the proper frame. What is a frame? Well, frame is simply the premise, if you will. It's the foundation from which everything else evolves. In the book, I tell a story about I was at my local Dunkin' Donuts, and there was a little boy who was kind of walking around the store. His parents were at another table, and they called him over. So as he walked toward his mom and dad, he took a spill on the floor. He fell. Now, he didn't fall hard, didn't hurt himself, but you could tell by the look on his face he was shocked. He intuitively knew that wasn't supposed to happen. So he immediately did what? He looked at his mom and dad to get their interpretation, the two people he trusts the most, right? What does this mean? What happens now? Well, Matt, I really believe that if his parents had gotten upset or panicky or, oh no, are you all right? He would have probably started to cry. But they handled it just beautifully. They applauded and they smiled and they laughed and they said, "Oh, what a fun trick! Oh, that looks so much fun." He immediately started to laugh. What the parents did is they set a functional frame, a productive frame, if you will, from which he could operate. And it's the same when we go into any interaction. Understand this: in any potential interaction, positive, negative, what have you, a frame will be set. The only question is who is going to set that frame. If you take a chance, if you allow the other person to set it, you're taking a chance that they understand this and that they know enough to be able to be sure and consciously set a proper frame. They may or may not. If you set the frame, now you're increasing your chances that it's going to go according to the best way for everyone. And then principle number 5 is to communicate with tact and empathy. If I may quote my dad, he has always said that tact is the language of strength. And to me, it sort of helps me to remember that, because tact can, in a sense, be a way of correcting someone or critiquing someone, or if I dare be politically incorrect, constructively criticizing someone. Not that we ever want to do any of that, but we're talking about the real world, not a fantasy world where nothing goes wrong. There are times we need to be able to teach. But Matt, we need to do it in a way that not only is that person not going to be resistant to us and defensive about it, but they're going to be open and accepting of at least hearing our ideas. And when we take all 5, and what I do in the book is I explain all that in one chapter, and then the rest of the book is simply short stories from a half a page to 3 pages, in which I basically help people see themselves in all these different situations and exactly how to work with them in such a way that it comes out as a beneficial situation for everyone involved.
Excellent. Well, Bob, thanks again so much for taking the time to chat with me. And again, the name of the book is Adversaries Into Allies. That's the correct title?
Yes.
Yes. Adversaries Into Allies, and it's available anywhere books are sold. If you want to, you can also learn more about Bob. You see his website there and on the screen, and his Twitter handle. So, Bob, thank you again so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Matt, thank you so much. My pleasure.
All right, and thank you for taking a moment to watch this video. I look forward to serving you in the very near future. Bye for now.